Hey, what's up? Welcome to English with Dane, a podcast designed for you to practice your English. As always, I'm your host, Dane, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at English with Dane. Write to me if you want me to talk about anything in particular, or if you want your music featured on the show. Today's episode is a special one because it's our first movie breakdown, our first movie review. As you know, I put up a poll on Instagram and Twitter asking you to choose between two different movies. The Sisters Brothers, which is a Western movie starring Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly, and Green Book, starring Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali. The response was clear, and Green Book was the winner. So here it is. You are listening to the 8th episode of English with Dane. Hit it. Okay, we have officially started the show, so I'm going to get right into it. I watched Green Book over the weekend, and I have several things to say about it. But before I do, I wanted to say that I'm going to try and talk about this movie without giving too many spoilers. I know it's practically impossible to review a movie or to break down a movie without spoiling it, but I will try my best because I'm sure that some of you still haven't seen it. However, sin embargo, there will be a few moments in which I talk about particular scenes, so if you haven't watched the movie, be warned, okay? Spoiler alert. So, Green Book first came out, salió, in theaters on November 16th of 2018. But before that, the movie premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 11th, 2018, where it won the People's Choice Award. This happens quite often, bastante a menudo, where a movie is premiered at a film festival before it is seen by the rest of the world, right? Before they show it to the rest of the world. By the way, the Toronto International Film Festival, which is abbreviated to TIFF, is one of the largest publicly attended film festivals in the world, and it attracts over 480,000 people every year. Some say, algunos dicen, that if a movie does well, si le va bien, in the Toronto International Film Festival, it is probable that it receives several awards, premios. And in the case of Green Book, it is definitely true because, as you know, Green Book won the Oscar for Best Movie and Best Screenplay, Mejor Guión. And Mahershala Ali won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, Mejor Actor Secundario o de Reparto. Viggo Mortensen was also nominated for Best Actor, but he didn't win. Instead, if you remember, Rami Malek won for his performance as Freddie Mercury in Bohemian Rhapsody. But anyway, Green Book did very well, le fue muy bien. So a little bit of context about the movie in question. Green Book is a biographical comedy drama, filmed and directed by Peter Farrelly, who is mostly known for directing comedies. He directed Dumb and Dumber, Dos Tontos Muy Tontos, There's Something About Mary, Algo Pasa con Mary, Shallow Hal, Amor Ciego, and others. And you wouldn't really expect, no esperarías, one of his movies to win an Oscar. No offense, but I mean, Dumb and Dumber, Shallow Hal, funny movies, I'll give you that, but not Oscar material. Anyway, back to Green Book. This movie is set in 1962, and it is inspired by the true story of a tour of the Deep South by African-American classical and jazz pianist Don Shirley and Italian-American bouncer Frank Vallalonga, known as Tony Lip in the movie, who served as Shirley's driver and bodyguard. By the way, we say played by when we refer to an actor carrying out a role. Okay, like interpretado por. In this case, Don Shirley is played by Mahershala Ali, and Tony Lip is played by Viggo Mortensen. So it's based on a true story, or inspired by a true story. And by the way, we say the Deep South like El Sur Profundo when referring to the cultural and geographic sub-region in the southern United States, which historically was differentiated as the states that were most dependent on plantations and slave societies during the pre-Civil War period, okay? The Deep South is also sometimes referred to as the Cotton States, los estados del algodón, because of the financial importance of cotton during these slave times. So naturally, an African-American person in the early 1960s in the Deep South would face many difficult situations. And this movie is about those situations. But not only about those situations, but we'll talk about that in a second. So the film was actually written by Farrelly, Brian Hayes Curie, and Vallelonga's son, right? Tony Lip's real son, Nick Vallelonga. And it was based on interviews with his father and Don Shirley, as well as the letters that his father wrote to his mother, which we see Tony write throughout the movie, a lo largo de la película. The movie is named after the Negro Motorist Green Book, which is a mid-20th century guidebook for African-American travelers. It was originated and published by African-American New York City mailman Victor Hugo Green from 1936 to 1966 during the era of the Jim Crow laws, when open and often legally enforced discrimination against African Americans was widespread. Widespread means that it was found almost everywhere. So in the movie, Tony is given the Green Book by the people that work for the record label, La Discográfica, to make sure, para asegurarse, that Don Shirley always has a place to stay, a place to sleep. Because as we know, due to the discrimination, debido a la discriminación, sometimes black people were not allowed to stay in the same hotels as white people. So this book that Tony ends up using a few times, que termina usando, gives name to the movie. This Green Book also had the names of places where you could get your car fixed, where you could eat, and it had the names of which towns you should avoid, los pueblos a evitar, etc. So now that we have a bit more context, let's get into some analysis. Overall, en general, I liked it. Me gustó. I thought it was an entertaining movie. There were hubo momentos, that made me laugh, and moments that made me reflect. Moments that made me smile, and moments that made me feel a lot of frustration and anger towards the discrimination that we see in the movie. And not only the discrimination, but also the hypocrisy. So Don Shirley is hired, is contratado, to play these gigs, right? These concerts in front of wealthy, educated people in the South. And he does. When he is performing on stage, he is admired and applauded. But when he gets off stage, cuando se baja del escenario, he is confronted by the reality of the situation. He is still, in many regards, just another black person in the South. And this is evident in several situations. In one of these situations, after performing, he is looking for the bathroom, and instead, he is told to use the outhouse, the latrine, right? A removed and dirty bathroom, which is away from the house, right? It's a small shed. In another situation, he is greeted, is bienvenido, with the utmost respect, and they tell him that he is the guest of honor. And then they refuse to let him into the restaurant of the club en el cual he is supposed to perform later that night. When he confronts them, right? When he confronts them about this, they don't back down. No se echan para atrás. And instead, they offer to bring him some food to the back room where the guests won't see him. And by this time, Tony and him are friends, right? And they have been through, han pasado por several mishaps, several difficult moments together. And in this case, they leave without performing. Tony then congratulates him, le felicita, for standing up for himself, right? For defending himself. And instead, Don ends up playing, termina tocando, in a different bar, right? And has a great time playing popular music, something which he had never really done before, algo que no había hecho antes. What I'm trying to say is that it was a movie that made me feel several emotions, right? But that said, dicho esto, they were very easy emotions to feel. Let me explain what I mean. It felt a bit easy in general. There were good guys, Don and Tony, and there were bad guys, right? The people in the South that were racist and treated them terribly. It was a bit black and white, no pun intended. Tony, the typical New York Italian tough guy, right, Tío Duro, who grows up with a negative perception regarding black people, comes around, cambia de opinión, and then realizes that being racist is not okay. Yes, very original. And I don't mean to be insensitive because racism is still around today. And of course, this movie sends a positive message, but it's also an easy message to deliver. There weren't any complex characters, in my opinion. Sure, the characters have their backgrounds, their backstories, and the life of Don Shirley is mysterious, and we don't really find out, no averiguamos, what really happened to him. Although we can imagine that he was maybe shunned from his family for being gay, perhaps. To be shunned is to be ignored and pushed away. But in terms of complex motivations and complex characters, I didn't really find anything. As a viewer, como espectador, I was taken on a nice trip, right? Where people fight against racism and overcome obstacles, superan obstáculos. And along the way, por el camino, I had some laughs and some nice moments. And there's value in that. But I also prefer deeper social commentary. I prefer emotional ambiguity, ambigüedad emocional. I prefer when there aren't such clear good guys and bad guys. If I want a good guys against bad guys situation, I can watch superhero movies and turn off my brain. Y apagar mi cerebro. I don't know. I did enjoy the movie, but what I'm saying is that it didn't demand that much of me. No me pidió demasiado. But I guess that's what makes it very accessible. I would have liked to see, me hubiese gustado ver, more of a struggle for Tony to have his opinion changed. I would have liked to see more of a personal battle inside Tony's head to accept Don Shirley and to realize that he has been wrong his whole life. It felt too easy. It's like he said, oh, I've been so stupid all of these years thinking black people were all terrible. I think I'm going to change my mind. So I guess I'm a bit torn about this movie, right? To be torn means to be undecided. Like one part of you thinks one thing and another part of you thinks something else. So I think I'm a bit torn about this movie. I enjoyed the My Fair Lady aspect of this movie, right? Or the Pygmalion aspect of this movie for you readers out there. When Don is trying to teach Tony to sound more educated when he speaks, and how he helps him write letters to his wife who is waiting for him in New York. It shows how Don is influencing Tony and helping him to become a better person. And at the same time, Tony influences Don by making him more down to earth, right? He makes him listen to popular music. He makes him eat Kentucky Fried Chicken in the car with his hands, etc. But again, it seemed a bit typical, a bit easy in my opinion, which doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy it. I had this same conversation with my brother, shout out to my brother, because he also watched the movie, and I think he described what I feel in one sentence. He said, it's a Disney movie for adults, right? Una película de Disney para adultos. And I think that's true. In terms of acting, I thought it was pretty good. I think Viggo Mortensen's accent was great, and his acting in general was great too. Mahershala Ali was also good, but I don't know if his performance was worth an Oscar. I don't know if this movie deserved an Oscar either. Although I enjoyed it and would recommend it, while I was watching it mientras la veía, I couldn't help but think, no podía evitar pensar, really? This movie won an Oscar? Again, I think I'm going to say something maybe unpopular, but I think that sometimes when movies come out and they are about the triumph of good values over racism, people tend to overreact and label these movies as incredible, when in fact they are just good. Not incredible, not Oscar-worthy, but good, solid movies. And I think that's the case with Green Book. Don't get me wrong though, no me malinterpretes. Racism has been such a big part of the history of the United States that you can't blame them for producing these type of movies. But you understand what I'm trying to say. I was reading a review from The Guardian, right, that also expresses something similar to what I was saying before about Tony suddenly being okay with black people after being quite racist early in the movie. Let's read this for a second, okay? It says, there are jarring, tone-deaf scenes in which Tony, a man who previously threw away 2 glasses that had been used by African Americans, is suddenly an expert in black culture who introduces his employer, right, his boss, to the joys of jazz and fried chicken. Before we continue, a quick vocabulary check. Jarring means estremecedor, or very obvious in this case. And tone deaf literally means que no tienes oído, but in this case it means poco acertado. Naive means ingenuo, inocente. And ill-judged means poorly judged, right? Mal juzgado, if you want a literal translation. So again, there are jarring, tone-deaf scenes in which Tony, a man who previously threw away 2 glasses that had been used, que habían sido usados, by African Americans, is suddenly an expert in black culture who introduces his boss to the joys of jazz and fried chicken. So this is what I was talking about before when I mentioned that I wanted more of an internal battle for Tony. He throws away, tira la basura, 2 glasses because black people used them. And then suddenly he's teaching Dawn about Aretha Franklin, Little Richard, and Chubby Checker. I mean, come on. So I guess that bothered me a little bit. It felt a bit strange. I think that's my biggest criticism of the movie. But again, overall, I liked it. I think my favorite part was when after they leave the club where the guy didn't let Dawn eat at the restaurant, they go to a different bar and Dawn gets on stage and he plays the piano. And he starts jamming with the house band. And he starts to smile as he plays because he had never had the opportunity to play music like that. And he sees the crowd dancing and enjoying it so much that he can't help but laugh and stand up while he plays. I think that was a big feel-good moment in the movie, and also for me, because it kind of symbolizes the change that he has undergone, por el cual ha pasado, and how Tony has influenced him and helped him become a rounder person who doesn't only appreciate the finer things in life, but also the common pleasures that one can experience. Okay, that's it for today. I'm sure I missed a lot of things about the movie. So if you think of anything that you want to add, write to me at English with Dane on Instagram and Twitter. I'll talk to you again on Friday for English with Dane, episode 9. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iVoox, etc. And remember, the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and a review. All right, thanks for listening. See you soon. Bye-bye.